China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the...
A major shakeup tonight at Boeing after a string of scary incidents involving the aircraft. The company's CEO announcing today he will step down.
From the U.S.
Two overnight machinists at Boeing here in St. Louis are operating without a contract agreement.
Workers have voted down a recent offer, and the current agreement expired at midnight.
A major shakeup tonight at Boeing after a string of scary incidents involving the aircraft. The company's CEO announcing today he will step down. China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S. Overnight machinists at Boeing here in St. Louis are operating without a contract agreement. Workers have voted down a recent offer and the current agreement expired at midnight. A storm is brewing in American industry, and it started with a decision that barely made headlines at first. Boeing, the aerospace giant that once symbolized American power in the skies, quietly revealed plans to move part of its production to Mexico. What looked like a corporate strategy soon exploded into a political firestorm. Within days, the White House delivered a thunderous response, threatening a 200% tariff on any aircraft built beyond U.S. borders. Boeing now faces the risk of being shut out of the very market it helped build. How did one of America's proudest companies end up in a showdown with its own government? And what could this clash mean for the future of global trade? It began in silence. The kind of silence that hangs heavy before words change everything. Two men bound by power but divided by vision spoke on a line that carried the weight of an entire industry. On one end, the President of the United States. On the other, the chief of Boeing, the company that for decades had carried America's name into the skies. No advisors, no cameras, no spectacle, only sharp words, a clash of pride, and the spark of a conflict that would soon sweep far beyond that call. In that moment, the stage was set for a battle that would test loyalty, strategy, and survival itself. When the call ended, the tension didn't fade. It grew louder. Kelly Ortberg, Boeing's CEO, refused to bend under pressure. Instead, he turned what could have been a quiet dispute into a public declaration. Boeing announced it would move part of its assembly line to Mexico, a decision that sent tremors through financial markets and drew immediate fury from Washington. For Boeing, the logic was simple. Years of financial strain, safety scandals, and the relentless pressure of global competition demanded change. But politics rarely follows logic, and the White House wasted no time drawing battle lines. The response was swift and punishing. The administration declared that any aircraft not built on U.S. soil would be hit with a 200% tariff before reaching domestic buyers. It was a direct strike at Boeing's most secure market. For decades, America had been Boeing's home turf, the anchor of its identity. Now, the company faced the unthinkable, being forced out of the very space it helped define. Ortberg did not back away. His statement to the world was defiant. Boeing's strategy would be guided by competition and survival, not by politics. That defiance transformed the fight into something larger. A question of whether corporations still had the freedom to chart their own path. In an age when politics reaches into boardrooms behind closed doors, the clash only deepened. Lobbyists filled hallways. Economists argued over outcomes, and politicians debated what loyalty meant in an economy tied across continents. Beyond Washington, the reaction turned fierce. Some insisted that American companies must prioritize national loyalty above profit. But for Boeing, the decision had nothing to do with abandoning the homeland. It was about survival in a world where competitors like Airbus surged forward without political handcuffs. And then the battle crossed borders. China, one of Boeing's biggest customers, retaliated with tariffs of its own, slapping a 125% duty on U.S. aircraft. Deliveries froze overnight. Billions of dollars worth of planes sat idle, wings grounded in warehouses with no buyers. The president went public, accusing Beijing of breaking agreements and fueling an even bigger storm. What began as a corporate decision now pulled nations into open confrontation. The damage rippled outward. Hundreds of suppliers who provided engines, avionics, and materials faced sudden uncertainty. Transportation firms scrambled to adjust routes. Cities built on aviation contracts. Places like Everett, Washington, and Wichita, Kansas, saw futures darken almost overnight. For communities whose livelihoods depended on Boeing, the fight between Washington and Ortberg was more than a headline. It was a threat to paychecks, to families, to entire local economies. Ortberg, unwilling to leave Boeing stranded, shifted strategy. He announced the company would redirect its stranded fleet toward new buyers in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, markets hungry for growth and less bound by political strings. The message was unmistakable. Boeing would not be cornered. It would find a way to survive, even if that survival meant reimagining where its future customers lived. By early 2025, that gamble began to pay off. Deliveries jumped to 130 aircraft in the first quarter, compared to 83 the year before. Revenues surged 18%, nearly touching $20 billion. The company was still struggling with negative cash flow, but Ortberg confidently declared Boeing would turn the tide by the year's end. For the moment, he appeared to have pulled Boeing back from the brink. But victory was far from secure. Ryanair, one of Boeing's biggest European buyers, issued a clear warning. If costs rose because of tariffs, it would pivot to Airbus or even China's COMAC. The warning highlighted a deeper truth. Airlines cared about affordability and reliability, not political grandstanding. If Boeing became a symbol of political risk, customers would walk away. This crisis revealed a dilemma larger than Boeing itself. Every multinational company now faced the same question: how to balance global flexibility with the expectation of loyalty to the home nation. For the answer was blunt. Expansion was not betrayal. It was survival. His stance resonated with executives across industries. Leaders at Apple, Tesla, and Ford, all bound to international supply chains, saw Boeing's defiance as a blueprint for their own battles with political pressure. Still, Boeing's path remained shadowed by deeper scars. The tragedies of the 737 MAX and the frightening mid-air panel detachment of 2024 had carved wounds that numbers alone could not heal. These were not dismissed as mechanical flaws. They were seen as failures of trust. Passengers questioned Boeing's commitment to safety, and trust, once broken, is the hardest asset to rebuild. Meanwhile, the Starliner program, once Boeing's hope for a new frontier in space, stumbled through failure after failure. Faulty thrusters, helium leaks, and an embarrassing mission where astronauts had to abandon Boeing's capsule and return to Earth aboard SpaceX's Dragon all underscored the crisis. If Boeing could not steady its commercial aviation division, its credibility in space would collapse entirely. All the while, Airbus advanced without restraint, capturing new contracts and broadening its reach. Boeing faced a razor-thin path: hold on to massive U.S. defense and aerospace contracts that bound it to Washington while still preserving enough global independence to compete. Lawmakers grew louder in their scrutiny, questioning whether Boeing's strategy aligned with national interest. With billions in federal projects on the line, every move carried enormous political weight. That early phone call between Trump and Ortberg soon became more than an anecdote. It became the symbol of a shift in power. What used to be quiet boardroom decisions were now matters of national debate, shaping markets, and even foreign policy. The tariff battle seeped into every corner of the industry. Part suppliers adjusted schedules, investors reconsidered timelines, and logistics companies braced for new routes. A single executive decision had thrown a vast interconnected system into turmoil. The aviation industry's fragility was exposed in full view. Years of planning, thousands of components, countless workers, all undone by a political directive delivered in a matter of days. Whether Ortberg's stand is remembered as reckless defiance or bold leadership remains uncertain. But this crisis was never only about airplanes. It was about the collision of politics, economics, and identity. It showed how vulnerable even the largest corporations are in a world where governments now wield power, not only through laws and armies, but through tariffs and trade wars. As the dust began to settle, one truth could not be ignored. Companies today are forced to choose between political obedience and strategic independence. That choice will not only shape profits, but define the future of global trade itself. For Boeing, the answer will be written not in speeches, but in how it navigates the next chapter of its story. What began as a tariff threat has now become a case study in corporate survival, in the fragility of global supply chains, and in the struggle for independence. In an age when national borders and business strategies no longer align, and as other industries, from pharmaceuticals to semiconductors, recalculate their own paths, Boeing's struggle stands as both warning and precedent. It shows that a single decision can send shock waves across markets, governments, and entire communities, and that a company's strength lies not only in its balance sheet, but in how it adapts when power and politics collide. The moment news leaked that Boeing was considering shifting part of its production to Mexico, the White House reaction was immediate and severe. Trump announced that if the plan moved forward, every aircraft built abroad would be hit with a crushing 200% tariff before entering the U.S. market. In the midst of this confrontation, Ortberg spoke directly with the president. Reports suggest he pledged Boeing's alignment with national priorities, highlighting the symbolic importance of projects like Air Force One, while promising that Boeing's planes would continue to meet the highest standards of safety, efficiency, and cost demanded by the United States government. While the details of the phone call were never disclosed, the broader message resonated loudly across boardrooms and political offices alike. Boeing was determined to protect its fragile relationship with Washington, but at the same time, it could not ignore the expanding demands of global markets. For a chief executive to engage a sitting president so openly, not through hushed negotiations behind closed doors, but through a public stance, was an extraordinary break from tradition. In the history of corporate America, moments when a CEO dared to push back at such a scale were exceedingly rare. This was a deliberate risk, one that carried the weight of immense consequences depending on how regulators, investors, and international customers would react in the months ahead. Ordinarily, large corporations prefer silence in times of conflict, issuing statements filled with carefully chosen, neutral language, while true debates unfold quietly in private. Boeing decided to go another route. The company stood its ground, signaling that retreat was not an option. Whether this would ultimately be remembered as an act of bold leadership or a reckless gamble would only become clear as the effects rippled through the industry. But one thing was certain. The choice would not go unnoticed. Complicating Boeing's position further is the rise of competitors that refuse to remain in the shadows. China's COMAC has been steadily carving out a foothold, especially in regions like Asia and Africa, where demand for fuel-efficient mid-range planes continues to accelerate. Airbus, already entrenched as Boeing's greatest rival, has been capitalizing on its reputation as the safer, less politically entangled choice. This mounting competition means that Boeing's challenge goes far beyond short-term tariffs or White House pressure. Its future depends on trust. Trust from governments that rely on its aircraft for defense. Trust from airlines that demand punctual deliveries, and trust from the flying public, who must once again believe in Boeing's commitment to safety and reliability. All of this now rests heavily on the leadership of Kelly Ortberg. His responsibilities stretch in multiple directions at once. Restoring confidence among passengers, navigating the minefield of political pressure, protecting key airline clients, and meeting the expectations of Wall Street. Each of those demands is daunting enough in isolation. Together, they create a test of leadership few executives will ever face in their lifetimes. Financial reports may suggest signs of recovery with revenues improving and deliveries ticking upward. Yet beneath those numbers lie unresolved issues. Boeing must hold on to its best talent, overhaul internal quality controls, and repair a fractured relationship with global regulators. The oversight surrounding the company no longer stops at its accounting practices. It reaches deep into its operational decisions and into the strength of its reputation. A reputation that once defined the company as the very embodiment of aviation excellence. What unfolds here will echo far beyond Boeing's own story. It raises larger questions for the corporate world. How should companies respond when political forces collide with global business strategy? Can a firm preserve loyalty to its home country while remaining competitive abroad? And how can leadership balance national obligations with the realities of international commerce? The timing could not be more critical. Global air travel is expected to surge over the next 20 years, powered by the rising middle class in Asia and Africa and the revival of international tourism. At the same time, pressure to embrace sustainable technology is intensifying. New aviation fuels, electric propulsion, and advanced aircraft designs are no longer speculative. They are becoming essential to the industry's future. Boeing cannot afford to fall behind in this race, especially as competitors like Airbus push forward with innovative green technologies and COMAC expands its portfolio with state-backed support. To understand how Boeing arrived at this crossroads, we must look back at its storied history. Founded in 1916 by William Boeing in Seattle, the company began as a small operation building seaplanes from wood and fabric. It quickly grew into a powerhouse during World War II, producing iconic bombers like the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-29 Super Fortress, which played pivotal roles in the Allied victory. Post-war, Boeing transitioned to commercial aviation, revolutionizing air travel with the 707, the first successful jet airliner, which shrank the world by making transcontinental flights routine. The 1960s and 70s saw the launch of the 747 jumbo jet, a symbol of American engineering prowess that dominated long-haul routes for decades. Boeing's merger with McDonnell Douglas in 1997 further solidified its position, but it also sowed the seeds of cultural shifts that prioritized financial gains over engineering excellence. The 21st century brought new challenges. The 787 Dreamliner, introduced in 2011, was a groundbreaking aircraft made largely from composite materials, offering unprecedented fuel efficiency. However, its development was plagued by delays, cost overruns, and supply chain issues, foreshadowing future troubles. Then came the 737 MAX crisis, one of the darkest chapters in Boeing's history. Launched in 2017 as a fuel-efficient update to the venerable 737 line, the MAX incorporated larger engines that altered the plane's aerodynamics. To compensate, Boeing added a software system called MCOS, designed to prevent stalls by automatically pushing the nose down. Tragically, faulty sensor data triggered MCOS in two fatal crashes: Lion Air Flight 610 in October 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March 2019, resulting in 346 deaths. Investigations revealed that Boeing had downplayed the system's significance in pilot training to avoid costly retraining, leading to a global grounding of the MAX for nearly 2 years. The fallout was immense: billions in losses, congressional hearings, and a tarnished reputation. Even after recertification in late 2020, Boeing faced ongoing scrutiny from regulators like the FAA. Fast forward to 2024, and another incident rocked the company. In January, a door plug blew out mid-flight on an Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9, exposing passengers to a terrifying decompression at 16,000 feet. While no one was seriously injured, the event triggered federal investigations, production halts, and a wave of cancellations. It highlighted persistent quality control issues stemming from rushed assembly lines and supplier pressures. Amid these safety scandals, labor unrest added fuel to the fire. In September 2024, over 33,000 machinists in the Pacific Northwest went on strike, demanding better wages, pensions, and job security. The walkout halted production of the 737, 767, and 777, costing Boeing an estimated $1 billion per month. Negotiations dragged on, with workers rejecting initial offers that included 30% pay raises but eliminated traditional pensions. By October 2025, the strike had spread to defense workers in St. Louis, where machinists building fighter jets like the F-15 and F-A-18 walked off the job. Senators urged Boeing to end the 8-week-long impasse, but the company expanded plans to replace striking workers, signaling a protracted battle that could last weeks or even months. This labor strife not only disrupted deliveries but also strained relationships with key customers, including the U.S. military. Despite these headwinds, there are signs of recovery. In the third quarter of 2025, Boeing reported strong financial results, with revenues climbing and deliveries accelerating. The company handed over more aircraft than in previous quarters, closing the gap with Airbus, which continues to lead in orders but faces its own supply chain challenges. Analysts note that Boeing is back to looking at the future, reportedly working on a replacement for the 737 MAX, a new single-aisle jet that could enter service by the mid-2030s. This development, long anticipated, aims to incorporate cutting-edge technologies like hybrid electric engines and advanced composites to meet stringent emissions targets. CEO Kelly Ortberg, who took the helm in August 2024 amid the company's deepest crisis, has been credited with stabilizing the planemaker. In his first year, he halted the freefall by focusing on safety culture, streamlining operations, and rebuilding trust with regulators. However, new challenges loom, including rising costs from tariffs and geopolitical tensions. Wall Street remains cautious, with projections showing improved earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization by $5 billion between 2025 and 2026, yet free cash flow may not surge dramatically due to ongoing investments. Boeing's defense division provides a buffer, with steady contracts for military aircraft and space systems, but even here, the Starliner woes persist. The capsule's repeated technical failures have delayed NASA's crewed missions, forcing reliance on rivals like SpaceX. Looking broader, the aviation industry faces a pilot crisis. Airlines worldwide scramble to fill cockpits as demand for air travel rebounds post-pandemic. Retirements, training backlogs, and burnout have created shortages, with estimates suggesting a need for hundreds of thousands of new pilots over the next 2 decades. This talent crunch affects Boeing indirectly, as delayed pilot training slows fleet expansions and aircraft orders. Sustainability adds another layer of complexity. With climate goals pushing for net zero emissions by 2050, Boeing invests in sustainable aviation fuels derived from waste and algae, as well as electric and hydrogen-powered aircraft for short-haul routes. Collaborations with startups and governments aim to accelerate these innovations, but regulatory hurdles and high costs pose risks. In this context, Boeing's defiance against political pressures takes on greater significance. The proposed move to Mexico, while aimed at cutting costs through lower labor expenses and proximity to suppliers, ignited debates on reshoring versus globalization. The White House's tariff threat echoes broader trade wars, reminiscent of past disputes with China over steel and tech. China's retaliatory duties exacerbate Boeing's woes, freezing deliveries to a market that accounts for a fifth of global aircraft demand. Yet, by pivoting to emerging markets, Boeing demonstrates resilience, tapping into booming air travel in India, Indonesia, and Brazil. As Ortberg charts this course, the company must also contend with Airbus's dominance. The European giant, unburdened by similar political dramas, has capitalized on Boeing's missteps, securing megadeals with carriers like Delta and Emirates. COMAC C919, a narrow-body jet challenging the 737 and A320, gains traction in domestic China and beyond, backed by state subsidies. For Boeing to reclaim its throne, it needs flawless execution on quality, innovation, and stakeholder relations. The road ahead is fraught, but history shows Boeing's capacity for reinvention. From wartime hero to commercial pioneer, the company has weathered storms before. Whether this latest chapter ends in triumph or further turmoil will depend on leadership's ability to unite workers, satisfy regulators, and deliver on promises. As global skies fill with more passengers than ever, Boeing's fate will shape not just aviation, but the interplay of commerce and power in our interconnected world. In the coming years, as electric planes take flight and sustainable fuels become standard, Boeing must lead or risk obsolescence. The decisions made today in boardrooms and factories will echo for generations, reminding us that in the high-stakes game of aerospace, survival demands both vision and vigilance. Expanding further on the labor disputes, the St. Louis strike involves key defense programs critical to national security. Workers there assemble advanced fighters that form the backbone of U.S. air superiority, and prolonged disruptions could delay deliveries to allies like Israel and Australia. Boeing's management has offered incentives, but union demands for restored pensions reflect deeper grievances over decades of concessions. Senators from Missouri have intervened, calling for fair negotiations to avoid economic fallout in the region. Meanwhile, the Pacific Northwest strike, now in its second month, has idled massive facilities in Renton and Everett, where the 737 MAX rolls off the line. Suppliers from Japan to Italy feel the pinch, with inventory piling up and revenues stalling. This cascade effect underscores the fragility of global supply chains, a theme amplified by recent geopolitical tensions. On the financial front, Boeing's 2025 results show promise, with commercial airplanes revenue up significantly thanks to ramped-up production. The defense, space, and security segment remain stable, buoyed by contracts for the KC-46 tanker and upgrades to the Apache helicopter. However, analysts warn that without resolving the strikes, fourth-quarter projections could falter. Ortberg's compensation package, approved at $22 million, has drawn scrutiny amid worker unrest, highlighting tensions between executive pay and frontline wages. Looking at competitors, Airbus's A320neo family continues to outsell the MAX, but Boeing is gaining ground with orders from low-cost carriers seeking competitive pricing. COMAC's expansion into Africa, with deals in Ethiopia and Nigeria, signals a shifting landscape where Western duopolies face Eastern challengers. Sustainability efforts at Boeing include partnerships with fuel producers to scale up bio-based jet fuel, aiming for 10% blends by 2030. Electric aircraft prototypes, like the hybrid electric demonstrator, promise zero-emission short hops, revolutionizing regional travel. Yet, infrastructure challenges, such as charging networks at airports, must be addressed. The pilot shortage exacerbates these dynamics, with airlines like United and American investing in training academies to build pipelines. Boeing supports these through simulator sales and curriculum development, but global demand outpaces supply, potentially capping growth. In space, Starliner's redemption arc involves rigorous testing to certify it for regular ISS missions, competing with SpaceX's proven Crew Dragon. Success here could restore Boeing's prestige in human spaceflight, opening doors to lunar and Mars endeavors under NASA's Artemis program. Ultimately, Boeing's saga is a microcosm of American industry's evolution, balancing innovation with accountability, global reach with domestic roots. As tariffs loom and markets shift, the company's ability to adapt will determine its legacy in the skies of tomorrow.